All right, welcome everybody. Really pleased to have you all here. Time to talk about coffee and climate. This is the latest installment of the declarations that we've rolled out. I can't remember if it's 17th or 18th, but excited to say that of the kind of 1,200 EICDA endorsements, about a third of those, at least well over 400, probably close to 500, have come via declarations. And declarations is basically are just ways, kind of an easy teaser, an easy little entree into the work that we're doing. It's nice to get together a group of people within an industry that are concerned about climate and have them be able to come in mass and support each other in raising their voice. So very pleased to have everybody here. I will let Emily and Allison give a little more detailed introduction to themselves when they come up, but want to thank them. Allison is a fantastic intern, a grad student at Colorado State, who was a CCLer before, but is a grad student now. Let her give more info. And Emily and Erica, I believe it is, in DC, were the kind of the caffeine behind this effort. We've talked about, and people have mentioned, oh, we should do something around coffee. Even Danny Richter has said coffee is really impacted by climate, and it's something that people can't live without. So this is an area that we should really focus on, and it took it to Emily and Erica in DC to really take it to the next level and get the ball rolling. So that's where we are. So with that, I will welcome you. Thank you. Please add your questions as we go along into the chat, and we'll have time for that afterwards. So over to you, Allison.
Great. So if you could go back to the agenda slide really quick, thanks. So today we're going to be covering the impacts of climate change on coffee specifically. And then we will talk about the coffee industry and the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act.
I'm on here. Oh. I'm listening to something new. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, awesome. And then we will talk about the coffee industry climate declaration itself. And then we will move on to some strategy and resources that we think could really help you in talking to different coffee shops, and then kind of explain why we need your help with this. And we'll open it up to Q&A after we're done. So Emily, if you could go to the, awesome, thank you. So like I said, we'll begin by talking about the impact of climate change on the coffee industry specifically. To start with, coffee is an agricultural product, so it makes sense that extreme weather events due to rising temperatures like wildfires, droughts, floods, etc., are impacting this industry's supply chain. In fact, studies show that the coffee plant could be extinct by 2080 if temperatures continue to rise at their current trajectory. And that was from a report by the Climate Institute. That report also said that by 2050, the amount of sustainable coffee farmland will decrease by half. The disappearance of the coffee plant would have a profound impact on the 120 million people worldwide whose livelihoods depend on it, many of whom live in the world's poorest nations. Some examples would be Africa, Colombia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Puerto Rico, and even within the US, Hawaii actually has a lot of coffee farmers. Coffee farmers are also taking on drastically increased costs in order to prevent things like erosion, flooding, and to control pests and fungi. And due to climate changes, some of them are even harvesting more times a year throughout the season. You can imagine how that might increase costs on the consumer end of things as coffee beans become more scarce. 80% of coffee growers are small peasant farmers who don't have the ability to buy up large amounts of property, which also means that they are particularly vulnerable to a volatile market. Because of this, large producers are now buying up property to be a part of the supply chain and trying to find more adaptable beans. The coffee industry will not be able to outrun the impacts of climate change, and as I just mentioned, many are already seeing the negative outcomes. Coffee drinkers can even expect to see flavor and aroma seriously impacted alongside soaring prices as coffee plants are continually affected by rising temperatures. So climate change is truly coming for your morning cup of coffee, which is why we're doing this webinar today. Emily, if you could go to the next slide, please, thanks. With all of that being said, we can now talk about why a carbon fee and dividend would be beneficial to the coffee industry. Besides the fact that putting a price on carbon would reduce emissions and help this industry avoid not being able to grow their product anymore, coffee shops and roasters should endorse the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act because it is effective. It has the strongest, most comprehensive emission reduction goals out of any other solution proposed so far, with a 90% reduction from 2015 levels by 2050 across all sectors. It is revenue neutral. It is the only climate bill that is 100% revenue neutral to help offset the rising costs while growing the economy. It's also bipartisan and good for people and the economy. The beverage industry is the third largest manufacturing industry projected to grow from this proposed legislation, because when people have more money in their pockets, they tend to go out and buy more beverages like coffee, beer, wine, etc. In addition, the EICDA has provisions for farmers like coffee farmers to exempt them from fossil fuel costs and livestock emissions on the farm. Virtually all top economists support a carbon dividend approach as the most effective and efficient policy. The Coffee Industry Climate Declaration provides a way for the coffee industry to weigh in on climate action and advocate for themselves. Now I'll let Emily introduce you to the Coffee Industry Declaration itself.
Great, thanks, Allison. So the Coffee Industry Climate Declaration basically lays out a lot of the information that Allison just described. First, it cites evidence from the UN IPCC and the Climate Institute about climate threats to coffee growers, such as the extinction of coffee by 2080 if temperatures don't stop rising. It also asserts the importance of the coffee industry for the economy. The coffee industry brings in about $225 billion in revenue every year and is responsible for over 1.7 million jobs. So anything that affects the coffee industry is also going to have reverberations on the wider economy. Then the declaration moves on to talk about the solution. So it talks about carbon pricing as a viable solution. It links to the Economist statement on carbon pricing, which is a really powerful statement. It cites around 3,500 economists who all support carbon pricing. It describes the Energy Innovation Act and why it's beneficial for businesses. And then finally, it moves on to a declaration that Congress should act immediately to implement a bipartisan carbon price. And in this declaration, there's an option to opt in to an EICDA endorsement. And business climate leaders have found that 95% of businesses tend to opt in and endorse EICDA in addition to supporting carbon pricing generally. So I'm just going to briefly show you what this actually looks like. So the declaration is available here online on the BCL website. It lays out everything that I just described here. And then the coffee shop or member of the industry can go here to complete this form. So they just fill out their name, their title, their website, etc. You can see here in the middle, there's the option to opt in to the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And then they can also upload a logo if they would like us to promote them on social media. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Allison.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. So now that you have a better understanding of what the declaration is, we'll share the strategy that we believe makes the most sense for this industry. To start, when we're thinking about who we want to talk to or targets, we're definitely looking at any local coffee shop owners, any local coffee brewers or roasters, any US coffee growers. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of those are actually located outside of the US, but there are some in states like Hawaii, and any associations of brewers or growers. A few examples of that would be the Specialty Coffee Association of America or the National Coffee Association, which is also referred to as the NCA. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yep. Thanks. So once you have your target picked out and you figured out who you want to talk to, the next step would be how to contact them. So one method that we really recommend, especially if it's your first time, I would say, talking to somebody, would be to email, Facebook Messenger, LinkedIn message, just to start. And then you can definitely follow that up with a phone call to have a more in-depth conversation on what carbon pricing is. Or if you didn't hear back from the email, maybe you can give them a call just to see if you can get them over the phone. And for those emails, we do actually have email templates for you. Those are in a toolkit that will show a little bit later in this webinar that should make it pretty easy for you to customize and send out to who you'd like to talk to. I would say that talking to somebody in person is probably ideal, just to be able to put a face to the name. But with COVID restrictions, you know, decide for yourself how you want to do that and if it can safely be done. And then once you've made contact, things to highlight in that conversation would be the impacts of climate change on coffee, which again, I reviewed earlier in this webinar, but that information is also available on the BCL resources page and also on that toolkit that I talked about. You can definitely also highlight that carbon pricing and the EICDA itself is a bipartisan, business-friendly solution. And then you can also highlight other industries or individuals who have endorsed in the food and beverage space. And again, a list of those is available on the BCL website. I know, for example, that there are a lot of beer breweries that have endorsed the EICDA and carbon pricing. So that's just another example of somebody in the beverage space. And another example that I wanted to mention of some kind of big key players in the coffee space would be Folgers and Starbucks. They have not necessarily endorsed carbon pricing, but they do have sustainability highlighted on their websites. So it's clear that they care and they acknowledge climate change in some capacity. So you could always bring those up as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then, you know, once you have them on board, hold on one second, I lost my notes. Yeah, so once you have them on board, the first step would be to encourage them to sign the declaration, which is really simple. Emily just showed you the website. So, you know, they go to the link, they fill out the Google form. And if they're unable to do that during your meeting when you're talking to them, make sure to send them a reminder email and just include that link in there to make it really easy and accessible. Another option for them once they're on board is to leave a testimonial about why climate change and carbon pricing is important to them. Those are always great to get others to sign. You can have them publicize their endorsement by putting signage in their shop. They can release press releases and they could also post on social media. And again, in this toolkit, we actually have some templates for you to share with them for Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. And I find that that's a really easy way for businesses to share themselves. It's easily customizable and it gives them kind of a jumping off point. You can also encourage them to contact their representatives. I think it's always great when representatives get to hear, especially from small business owners. And then definitely see if they can help you make any other connections. Coffee shop owners might know other stores or brewers in the area, and they'll likely know or be connected with other businesses or organizations that might be interested in signing. And so now I'll give it back to Emily to give us some tips on outreach.
Great. So here in the DC chapter, we've had a lot of fun getting the coffee outreach effort going. We scheduled a coffee shop outreach day where we got together a whole bunch of volunteers to all go out to different coffee shops on the same day. So we kind of built some camaraderie around it. We also got our craft on. We made some upcycled containers out of tin cans and jars and put little herbs that we got at the farmer's market and brought them with us to have these conversations and left them behind as a little thank you gift for people's time and consideration. So it was kind of a way to, you know, make ourselves memorable and also to build those relationships. We are committed to supporting the coffee shops who endorse, so giving them shout outs on social media. A volunteer recently left Yelp reviews. We can of course patronize the business when we're there. So there's lots of ways to kind of make this a two-way relationship. When selecting coffee shops, we've also found that it's best if we prioritize coffee shops that have kind of a green ethos to begin with. So if that's advertised on their website, they're probably a good one to start reaching out to. And then we also found that we do need a lot of follow-ups in order to get an endorsement to come through. Often people aren't ready to endorse immediately. So we've developed a weekly follow-up schedule where different volunteers are assigned to different coffee shops, and they just follow up once a week with an email or a call or an in-person visit to kind of keep that conversation going. So to share a few more resources for you when you are ready to get your coffee shop outreach underway, the first is this toolkit here. And this toolkit basically provides a step-by-step set of instructions for you to follow as you start reaching out. So joining the Coffee Grasstop sub-team, finding the local coffee shop you want to reach out to, what that outreach is really going to look like. Then it also has email samples down here. They have a long version of an email and also a shorter email sample. After a coffee shop endorses, there are samples here for thank yous, for social media thank yous on Twitter and Facebook. So basically, this kit is like a one-stop shop for you to kind of get all your resources in one place. Then the declaration I've already showed you. When you do visit coffee shops, we have a handy dandy flyer here that has the most basic information, kind of an at a glance look, and then it has a QR code that links directly to the declaration. There's another one-pager here with a little bit more detail for you on how climate will affect the coffee industries and what coffee owners or drinkers can do about it. For a very comprehensive report, you can go to this Climate Institute report. Some of the information that Allison talked about at the beginning about the impact of climate change on coffee is all cited here in this report. You can see there's a really nice map here that talks about how different countries in the world will be affected. If you want sort of some up-to-date articles, Allison also talked about Starbucks, for example, and what they're doing to tackle climate change. So there are some articles in this folder that you can take a look at and read or even bring with you. And then when you do thank your coffee shop after they endorse, here's an example post that you can put on social media to highlight what they've done, and you can edit it with Canva software. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end here. Sorry, I'm having some issues with the slides. Okay, join the team.
Yes, join the team. Thank you. Oh, Randy, you're muted.
Fantastic, Allison and Emily. Appreciate everything, all the great, fantastic information, resources, and of course your great spirit in bringing this to us. So with that, open to questions, comments, thoughts, fantastic ideas.
Somebody's asked for the link to the resource page in the chat. Emily, do you have that up?
Yes, I can just drop it into the chat. I might stop screen sharing here for a second, but yes, let me drop that link into the chat.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. I have a question. Allison, you mentioned Starbucks. I don't know if I should assume you're talking about each local Starbucks shop or if you're talking about corporate.
Yeah, so I think it's their corporate offices that have set up their sustainability goals. And again, it's not like they've endorsed carbon pricing or talked to CCL at all necessarily. They're just an example of a, like I mentioned, a big player in the space that has proven that they acknowledge climate change and that they seem to care about the environment, at least from their sustainability website. So what we're talking about here, though, I believe is more going out and approaching local coffee shops. So not like each individual Starbucks, not like a big chain like that, but just, you know, your local, could be a mom and pop coffee shop, or I know some cities have some local chains as well.
Yeah, and I have tried to connect with Starbucks. We've had a CCLer up in Seattle, ex Starbucks gentleman, tried to work that, and I've tried, but if anybody, needless to say, we haven't gotten anywhere, but I know that they are committed and moving towards. I know they're doing a lot of research and have test farms on different varietals and stuff of beans in different places. So they're very concerned and doing things on the business side. But in terms of policy, I haven't seen them step into climate or particularly carbon pricing policy. But would love if anybody has a contact or knows somebody in CCL that can get us connected with Starbucks corporate. Would certainly like to talk to them more.
Well, I've pretty much stopped using Starbucks because there's so many nice local mom and pop places right now. This is probably a good time to start this type of effort because yesterday, the day before, last couple of days, there was an article in the New York Times that coffee prices are at a peak right now because of drought and flooding and pressures on growers. So it's probably fairly timely.
Yeah, we'd love to see that article if you have a link to it. I'll have to look that up. And to your point, absolutely, your local shops, love to support them anyway, as much as we can. And what we're hearing from Danny and Ben in DC, CCL DC, is our members of Congress really want to hear from small, medium-sized businesses. So it's great, if we can make inroads, if we could get Starbucks. But right now, the push is to get local folks, particularly obviously in key congressional areas, conservative districts, et cetera. Everybody loves coffee, right? Except me.
Yeah, this has been a great presentation. I've learned a lot. I wanted to mention that the climate change and coffee blight in Honduras is generating a diaspora from Central America that's impacting on our southern border. So it even goes beyond just the enjoyment of coffee, which I'm certainly an aficionado. Yeah, it really it's impacting on a lot of lives.
Yeah, thank you for that. Looks like Kaylee had your hand up.
Yeah, hi, it's Callie actually.
Callie,
There's
thank you.
several of us with similar names. Thanks, a great presentation. And I feel empowered to talk to someone I have a social connection with who owns a 2-branch coffee shop in our town. And I'm also very sorry to hear about Honduras because some of my favorite shade grown and fair trade coffee has come from there. But just a question about any small business as opposed to the larger Starbucks, which can absorb more. The question can come back to you, won't my costs go up, my delivery trucks, my energy to keep the lights on, whatever. That's something that I've always struggled with the small business and the dividend, which comes back to their employees, but not to the business. Do you have a sort of good way to deal with that?
Allison, you want to take a stab?
Oh, thank you.
Hard one.
I actually don't remember the exact BCL answer to that, to be honest.
That's okay. I'm putting you on the spot, but I'll give you my
That's okay.
perspective. And it sounds like somebody else has a comment too. Well, first of all, they're an industry like the ski industry and the wine industry and all these other industries that are really seeing the impact already, right? So they're already taking in the costs, in terms of increasing costs of beans, in terms of supply chains, in terms of farmers, et cetera, suffering. So this is a way that actually spreads that cost across the entire economy. So that's one. So that's a positive. Two is the increase in fossil fuels is economy-wide as well. So your competitors will be in the exact same situation as you.
Oh,
Third point is that if you believe climate change is an issue, then we need to be able to properly price fossil fuels. They're going to go up. Either you're going to cut them out, so the price is going to go up, or you're going to put a fee on them. The price is going to go up. But the net result is that emissions are going to go down, and we show that based on the EICDA, we're actually able to get emissions reductions in line with what the IPCC and other kind of key scientific bodies are telling us is necessary. So this is actually, from what the economists, as Emily pointed out, what they're saying is the actually most cost-effective way to do it that would have the least impact on your business with the greatest impact on emissions reductions.
Great, thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Anybody
Yeah, the
else?
first part of that was what I was thinking too, that climate change is already driving up costs, so.
Yeah, and as cost goes up, people may make decisions not to drink coffee. I don't know, what is climate change doing to the tea industry, which might be an alternative to coffee that could impact their business? Is tea also being affected by climate change? Does anyone know?
I've not done the research on that yet. I would have to imagine yes. I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously affecting kind of all agricultural business. I don't know, and I don't know what fraction of the coffee compared to tea as an overall business. I think it's much smaller, particularly in the U.S. Maybe in the U.K. it's different. But to the other point, in terms of what was I going to say? In terms of the impact, if you look at the REMI study, and that was in the toolkit, you'll actually see that the beverage industry is considered to be, one of the biggest beneficiaries of having a carbon price. You get healthcare, and I can't remember what else, but healthcare is way up there. When people have extra money, and we've seen it with COVID, right? When people have extra money, what do they spend it on? They spend it on healthcare, they spend it on drinks, alcohol, and I don't know the actual impact of coffee, but I know my friends who drink coffee a lot. That's one thing that they were not going to go without.
Definitely. Thanks.
And one thing, Callie mentioned that the employees are getting a dividend, but so are the consumers are getting the dividend. And many of us are addicted to coffee. Now, although we could, break ourselves of that addiction pretty quickly, but we enjoy it. So I would say, there are other reasons why people will continue to drink coffee.
Yeah, and a healthier addiction than fossil fuel, I would say, on the whole.
Right. You live longer if you drink at least 4 cups of coffee a day.
Julie, did you have a comment about tea you want to share? It looks like there's that.
Yeah, just a real quick Google search. I remembered hearing something not that long ago about tea and the impact. And as you might expect, as another plant, that yes, it also are expecting some serious impacts. And that's just one quick article from a reasonable source that I found. One of the first things in the summary is, it extends the growing season, which you would think is good, but that also means insects have more opportunity to do damage. I suppose you could say, well, there are more plant species that are used for teas, but that doesn't mean everybody likes them. But at least, now not necessarily the coffee roasters, but the coffee shops, the small shops, they offer both coffee and tea. So
That's
I think,
true.
it's not going to be that unique to say, oh, well, just switch over, no biggie. But thanks. No, this has been a great webinar to participate in. I'm looking forward to getting going. We've got a lot of coffee shops out here on Whidbey Island out near Seattle. So yeah, this will be good.
Awesome.
Looks like a beautiful day there.
It is.
Great. We're getting close to the end of the hour. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions, but I just want to be respectful. I'm going to stop the recording at 1:30. So if there's any last question before I kind of shut the recording off, happy to answer it right now.
Hi there. I actually have one quick question if we've got time for it. So I was wondering a bit about, I completely understand why we want to have small businesses on for this, but I was wondering if we wanted to still have kind of that push for the big corporate businesses. And the reason for that is just because I think that sometimes when members of Congress see large business interests, that can really turn their heads. And we're, of course, trying to to get this bill through. But I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts and BCL's response to that.
Okay, I'll offer my thoughts on it, which is, both are great. Definitely bigger companies, our experience has been take a lot longer, and they have to jump through 100 hoops internally in order to support something. And generally speaking, they have not been willing to support any specific legislation. Our hope and prayer is actually when there's a companion bill in the Senate and it's actually has some momentum to it, et cetera, that they will step into it more with their dollars and lobbying staffs. But definitely a heavier lift, whereas smaller companies, small, medium-sized companies, easier to get contacted with the owner or president of that entity, and so easier to get a decision. And at least what we're hearing back from our DC office is that Congress people want to hear more from small, mediums. They're really concerned about what the impact would be on them. It reminded me as well that Starbucks is actually part of Ceres. If those of you that know Ceres, CERES, fantastic organization they do a lobby day in DC on climate, and they've been pushing for carbon pricing. So the companies that are involved in that, Nike, Starbucks, I think Procter and Gamble, et cetera. So Starbucks does support a price on carbon, at least generally speaking. So if anybody has any other comments, at least to that, or did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, again, I'm going to stick around, but I'm going to end things and just thank you all for being here. And yeah, let's go get some coffee shop. So.